You know how many people are watching?
Don't know, but it'll come in.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's 1 or a million.
You're on.
Oh, we're on. Okay. Right. Well, let's kick off, hey? So my name's Maury Lee. I came from Brisbane the other day. So I'll be, yes, 3 cheers for Brisbane. So I'll be down here with you until Thursday. So let's see, welcome. So I thought I'd just give you a brief introduction, a light introduction. So there's the light, there's my name's Maury Lee, so that's the introduction. So I guess just quick background, I became a Christian in 1978, 7th of January, 1978. And then was a futurist until one day in 1989, a friend of mine, I always thought revelation was in the future and I'd be flying up in the clouds, you know, going up in the clouds to be with Jesus. And so my friend and I always understood revelation as being about Rome and being in the future. So I'd read myself into Revelation. Then a friend of mine said, no, Revelation is not about Rome. Revelation is about Jerusalem. I said, Jerusalem? Are you joking? Like, who ever heard of that? But anyway, he's a good friend, and Keith Moore was his name. Welcome, Helena. Lovely Helena. Keith Moore was his name, and he gave me a lead. It was just a small idea that Revelation was about the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. I hadn't heard of it before then, but it was just a thread that he gave. So I liked him, so I thought I'll go home and study that. And the more I studied, it was like unraveling a garment. Just kept on pulling on the thread. And I'm still pulling on the thread. I don't know how many years later. Don, you can do the math for me. But just quickly, so basically, I guess I try to fill in the gap between academics and the pew, really, and to try to explain why this idea is so important, so very, very important, not just for us, but for Western civilization and for the history of the world going forward. Because an injustice has been done to us in the past and we want to unravel that, but it'll go on. So basically, I analyze ideas, big ideas, and not verse by verse. I'm not very good at that at all. But analyzing big ideas and systems of knowledge, in systems of biblical knowledge. There's 5 aha moments of self-analysis, not just in my life, but in life generally. And I'd just like to go through them quickly. My first introduction to life was I was about 3.5 years old. There I am sitting up there in the blue. And I realized that there's a greater, larger reality to my own reality. I used to think that I was boss of the house. And Dad said, okay, you go in your room. Meh, 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 meh. Oh, okay, I'm going to the room, Dad, you know. And I realized that there was a greater state of affairs, a greater meaning to life than just what I wanted or what I thought. The second, I was about 5, and I call this polycentrism. Dad built bunks for me and my brother, and I was on the top bunk. And at 5 years old, I believed in Brisbane, I could look out from my top bunk, look out the window. I believed I could see the Sydney Harbour Bridge. There was this arch of light, like this, and lying, and I swore I could see the Sydney Harbour Bridge. I told Dad, I can see the Sydney Harbour Bridge from my bunk. He said, are you kidding? Like, that's 1,000 kilometres away. No, it's true, I can, you know. And he says, no, that's about 5 kilometres away. And it was just an arch of lights. So then he taught me polycentrism. There's a larger reality to what I was looking at. And my own perspective wasn't the sole perspective. Ethnocentrism, age 6, I used to believe that, well, okay, if my city is not the center of the world, then my country certainly is Australia. That's the center of the world, right? And then I saw the globe. Ah, dang. So there's a larger reality of my country. Age 7, I looked out at the sun. I saw the sun going around the earth. I thought, well, at least we're the center of the universe. That's at least what I can get a hold of. But then I found out there's a larger reality to that also. And the sun is the center, the contextual center of the solar system. And the planets rotate around the sun. And at age 36, I discovered my futurism. There was a larger historical reality to that. And that larger reality I came to learn was this temple system here. And it is this which is the central organizing idea of the entire society or entire civilization that they were born into. So that's what I'm going to go around. There's 3 systems in the old days. If you had a horse and it broke down, you just shoot it. But now we have cars, you can't shoot a car. But if you're if you have a car that won't go and you want to problem solve that, okay, there's 3 systems involved in a car. Fuel system, the spark system, and the mechanical system. So if your car won't go, the first thing you do is lift the bonnet, pull the motor out and take the pistons out and check each piston for a crack, right? The car won't go, we've got to check the pistons. Maybe the crankshaft is not balanced, you know? And you go, no, there's an easy way. Then, okay, we'll just pull the distributor out and pull the leads off and put in new spark. Point where you start to look to troubleshoot a car that won't go. Why? There's 3 systems. The simplest system is the most relevant and the most direct system, which is the fuel. There's 3 basic systems to talk about when you're dealing with prophecy. So there's 3 moving parts. The first part is time. When are these things to be? The second moving part is language. What do these things mean? And the third one is context. Where is this happening? So it's very simple, really. Time, language, and context. So analyzing prophecy is a question of time, really. So the most relevant genre to understand these things is in terms of chronology or time. So what we're going to do is we're going to problem solve the millennium here. When was the millennium? In the old time, we've had like 2,000 years of it being like 5 to 12 and the end is nigh. And so we've always been waiting for that. But there is a problem in the millennium because it doesn't add up. It doesn't add up because it doesn't add up mathematically. So mathematically, it doesn't add up because the first 1,000 years have passed, the second 1,000 years has passed, Y2K, and now we're in the 3rd millennium, and there's still been no first millennium. So it doesn't add up. Secondly, it doesn't add up logically. So Jesus returns, we know, in Scripture, in Matthew 24. He returns to destroy a temple, but there's no temple for him to return to. So people have hypothesized, well, maybe he comes back and builds the 3rd temple and then destroys that one. But where does the 1,000 years fit in? So it just doesn't add up logically. And it doesn't add up because it doesn't add up factually. If you observe Jesus' time facts, he says this generation will not pass away until all of these things, okay, there's only 3 choices of quantity, all, some, or none. Until all of these things take place. That is 100%. Normally, with many theologians, they look at that passage, this generation will not pass away until all of these things are fulfilled. They do 4 things with those facts of Jesus, okay, until this generation. They deny it, ignore it, expand it, or manipulate it. So that's the first thing they do with the time data. No. A time theory should be based on time facts. The theory is offered to explain what we see, what we observe. So where does it come from? This idea of millennium, which is one of the key ideas that we're going to have a look at. It comes from Revelation 20. Blessed and holy is the one who has part in the first resurrection. Over these, the second death has no power, but they will be priests of God and of Christ, and reign with him for 1,000 years. Verse 11, I saw a great white throne, and the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and Hades gave up the dead which were in them, and they were judged, every one of them, according to their deeds. Key ideas: first resurrection, 1,000 years, death and Hades, judgment. How are they related here? So the idea of a literal 1,000 years was really confirmed in the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. So these guys said in the Nicene Creed, the third day he rose again, according to the scripture, he ascended to heaven, and he will come again. Okay? So in 325, these guys look at Revelation 20, can't explain it, but it's only 325, and the first millennium is really 675 years away, so it's a pretty safe bet. If it hasn't happened in the past, it will happen in the future. And so that was a kind of no-brainer for the Council of Nicaea to say it's in the future. And then they wrote it in their creed books. And then the creed books became the gospel, as good as the gospel for all of Christianity after that. So their solution was to add 100 years to Jesus' temple prophecy. But now we know it doesn't add up. You can't keep adding and 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 adding. That simple strategy has failed a long time ago. So it failed. It was a prophetic failure. No millennium. But we've inherited their mental operation of adding and adding and adding to every generation. And that is the only methodology of futurism. So what the Council of Nicaea did not do is this. They didn't consider the history of the temple, the natural context of the temple, the original prophecy of the temple, the types of the temple, the ontology of the temple, the chronology of the temple, the semantics of the temple. They didn't consider the sequence of temple events, and they didn't consider the teleology of the temple. And that's what we're going to do in the time left in this session. So what I'd like to do is offer an alternative model, a first century model of time. What it looks like, it looks something like this. This generation will not pass away until all things are fulfilled. So basically, it's super simple. It's no-brainer. It's just a line with a cross, 80, 30, 40 years after that, 70 AD, the end. And it ends in the destruction of this thing here. So that's the simple model. And how does it work? That time statement, the millennium, testably, I offer here, it dates from the 10th century BC. So the millennium, testably, you can test this historically, dates from the 10th century BC. So we will offer 10 testable reasons for an historical model, and there they are. The radial, the thing that unites all these, the mathematics, the content, the prophecy, type, ontology, chronology, semantic sequence, teleology, history, the thing that unites all of those is the 10th century temple. And here is the model. So let's go through them. Historically, the natural context of what Jesus was talking about. So if you go back, Matthew 24, Jesus is standing in front of a 10th century temple, and it's about to be destroyed. It has big rocks built in it. These stones are the size of railway carriages, like 40 feet long, 6 feet high, 8 feet wide, like weighs 50 and 60 tons. See these stones, Master? Aren't they impressive? Jesus says, nah, no big deal. These things, there won't be one of them upon another that shall not be thrown down. Oh, really? Well, when's that going to happen? And what's the end of the age thing that goes along with that? So the historical context, we have to go back 10 centuries to the thing that Jesus was talking about historically. So we know, historically, King David was born around 1040 BC. King Solomon was born around 1010 BC. So David didn't build the temple but he provided for it, and he provided for it really, really well, really well. And that's a different subject. I better not get into that. But King David died in 970 BC. King Solomon became king, his son, because David was promised a son upon his throne. King Solomon became that son initially. So he became king, and in the first 4 years, he organized things, and then he started building the temple in around 967, 66 or 67 BC. So 966 years before Christ, Solomon built the temple. It took him 7 years, according to 1 Kings chapter 6 and verse 38. And it says that he took 7 years in building it. So number one, first point, historically, the temple institution dates from the 10th century BC. Second, mathematically, the lifespan of the temple covered 1,000 years. Oh no, the millennium. Are you saying the millennium is past and we don't add it up into the future, but we subtract? Yes. So from construction to destruction, the temple institution stood for 1,000 years. So it was opened in 960 BC, and which is an amillennial period. 960 years is not 1,000 years. It's an amillennium. Others have said that, well, what about the 40 years from Jesus, from the time of his prophecy to its fulfillment? That's 40 years, and it has all the properties that he was talking about in Revelation chapter 20. 40 years is not a millennium. It's an amillennium. Meaning the Greek prefix means not. It's not a millennium. So 960 years is not a millennium. 40 years is not a millennium. But the 40 years of Jesus' prophecy completed the total of 960 years that made 1,000 years. And if you don't believe me, I have a calculator here, okay? And I carry this around with me everywhere, Brother Don. Hopefully I can get a light here. But if I type in, where's on? Oh, here it is. If I type in 960, okay, this is just to show, I didn't make this up. If you add 960 plus 40, okay, it says 1,000, okay. The calculator might be made in China, but this calculator doesn't lie, okay, doesn't lie. But just observationally, objectively, those two figures add up to collectively 1,000. So mathematically, the temple institution stood for 1,000 years. Contextually, the thing that Jesus stood in front of and the historical thing are connected. So what Jesus stood in front of was the temple institution. Now, I'd just like to make a little distinction. When Solomon built the temple, it wasn't just a building, okay? It was something more. It wasn't a building to keep the rain off their heads while they sacrificed. You go, oh, this is a really cool, it won't get wet under this. It's very expensive shelter. But it was an institution. And I had some notes just here before I came. I chucked them in, which was kind of profound. Hopefully they're here. Ah, yes. So this thing wasn't just a building, it was an institution. So back in 960 BC, Solomon built the building, but it was an institution. It was an institution because in the temple was the repository, or the holding place of God's holiness, where heaven met earth. 2, it contained the presence of God in a cloud. And to prove this, I've brought the cloud. Here it is. It came from an old pillow, actually, and that fits in there. In 1 Kings, it says, 1 Kings 7, that God, when it was opened in 960 BC, God came down in a cloud, filled the whole building with this. In 1 Kings, I might just read that quickly so you can get a a little bit of a feel, 1 Kings 8. 1 Kings 8:1, Solomon assembled all the elders. It's 960 BC. The heads of the tribes, the heads of the fathers, brought up the ark, which came from Zion. And after all this had been gathered together, this building, David contributed 100,000 talents of gold. A talent is like 28 kilograms of gold. Okay, so you got 100,000 talents of gold. Okay, so a talent is 100,000 multiplied by 28 kilograms, and then you have to multiply that number that you get by 153,000 Australian dollars per kilogram. So now the figure of the gold in this thing alone is astronomical. It's just so valuable. So now this moment, this momentous moment had come when God was created with a stable place to live. In verse 10, and oh, that's right, it says the ark was placed in there in verse 1 Kings 8:8. The ends of the poles could be seen, but they could not be seen. They are there to this day. And there was nothing in the ark except the 2 tables of stone that Moses had done. So this is not the original, of course. So because I'm not supposed to open it or touch it. So, better not open it. But anyway, inside there was a number of things, but chiefly, or exclusively, according to one text, there was the 10 commandments of Moses that were inside the ark. The ark was then sealed up, and on this day, the cloud came down, the ark was taken into the temple and located in this place right at the back here in the Holy of Holies. And so it was placed in there at the back. So I'm just going to, got some little scrolls here that I want to read out to you if I get time. So the ark goes into the covenant. Now, this is an eternal institution. It was given at the beginning of time of the creation of the nation. In Exodus chapter 12, verse 1, you'll find God gave a new calendar. It was an ecclesiastical calendar. But that became the beginning of time for the Jews. According to Alfred Edersheim, in this amazing book called The Temple, which is still the standard authority on the temple. So now time begins back at the time of the Exodus. This becomes an institution. The institution goes into the temple. The temple is founded in 960. Now the clock is ticking. What else is in the temple? The function of the temple institution is just profound. God lives there. It says the gates of Hades, contained the promises of blessing and cursing in there. It was both the gates of Hades and the gates of paradise. It was the location of the eyes and ears of God. It was God's protection there. It was his witness there. It was the oracle was in there. Time was there. It was God's timepiece in a way, or the national timepiece. It regulated the feast days, the Sabbath days, the assembly days, the new moons, the jubilees. It counted all the jubilee years. But that was in there. It was the national treasury. It was the Fort Knox of the entire nation. The weights and measures were in there, which is very interesting. Weights and measures created in the temple. The priestly records are in there. The Levitical genealogies are held there. It's the repository and the censor of all the literature. The scrolls are in there. The law of Moses is in there. The judicature is in there. The judges are in there. It was the theocracy. It was the seat of religious and political power. 3 times a year, it became the focal point, and the whole nation came down. They flowed down like rivers to the sea, down to Jerusalem. The assembly point of the nation at Pentecost, Feast of Booths, the Passover. All the blood sacrifice was in it for unintentional sins only, and there was forgiveness. It was the center of Levitical training and practice. It was the ontological basis of the new temple in Revelation? Chuku. You got to go back 1,000 years to find out what's the real world basis of this temple in heaven, this New Jerusalem, Old Jerusalem. So it's the real life basis of that. And it was part of the Old Testament system of animal sacrifices to psychologically atone for human sin. But it failed because it's not possible for the blood of bulls and goats to forgive sin. So all this happened in this year when the temple was opened. And so what we find is that in Solomon's time, it says the cloud filled the temple, but this was the presence of the Lord, and this was a memorial based on what happened previously in the wilderness. Reason 6, contextually, Jesus is separated from the original building by 1,000 years, but it's the institution that continued. When Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the building in 586, the Jews came back after 70 years from exile, and then they continued the institution. So it was like a cut down tree, okay? But it grew again. And so it continued on until Jesus' time, when it was completely uprooted. So contextually, the temple institution dates from the 10th century BC. Prophetically, its use-by date was 1,000 years. And this is the fun part. So these scrolls are in the temple. And in the temple, it had, one of the scrolls was this: I am the Lord your God who brought you out of slavery in Egypt. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol or graven image. So they were the 10 commandments. They were in the temple. But also, if you turn with me to, well, you don't have to, really, it's on the board. Solomon in 1 Kings chapter 9, okay, 1 Kings 8 goes through all these blessings. God, I'll bless you here, I'll bless you there, and I'll bless you if you come, and my eyes and ears, my protection will be there. And then he finds out there's no free lunch. And now the fine print. Here's the fine print. But if. Okay, that's a 3-letter word. That's a 2-letter word. Very powerful things, little words, you know. But if you or your sons do not keep my commandments and go after serve other gods and worship them, then I will cut off Israel. And the house I've committed, it will be cast out. That's strong words. So Israel will become a proverb and a byword for all people. And this house, this great house, like $15 billion, with the money that they built on this, they spent on this. You could build the 3 pyramids of Giza. You could throw in a Roman Colosseum, $633 million, and you still have enough money left to build 6 Eiffel Towers with 1 temple. That's how valuable it was. But if this will be gone if you don't obey. So these are the conditions. This is the fine print. So prophetically, the temple was doomed from the 10th century BC at its inauguration. Reason 5, typologically, it was fulfilled 1,000 years later in Revelation. So in Revelation, we have Jerusalem was a type of the holy city, okay? New Jerusalem. Now, that term is very interesting, the holy city, because it occurs 10 times in Scripture, and it only ever, exclusively, refers to Jerusalem. 8 times. The other 2 times it refers to New Jerusalem. So in Revelation chapter 11, 1 and 2, it says, "And the holy city shall be trampled underfoot 42 months. Surprise! Jerusalem was trampled underfoot 42 months. Jerusalem is the holy city. Therefore, Jerusalem is the harlot city that was to be spoken of. It was the type. 2, Jerusalem was the woman type of the New Jerusalem in Revelation. So this is the woman type. Paul says it in Galatians 4 about the woman being Hagar. It was the bride type because in the Old Testament, Yahweh was the groom, Jerusalem was the bride. And the covenant with the bride was in here, in the temple. And these are the terms of the covenant. If they broke the terms, that's it, deal is off. It was the kingdom type for the new kingdom back there. It was the harlot type of Sodom and Egypt and Babylon in Revelation. And people say, well, that's a bit of a stretch, I think. You know, how can you say that Jerusalem is Babylon? Well, Babylon is not really a name, it's a title there, what they call a toponym. Topos means place, nym is name. A toponym is a place name. So if I say that Charlie is a Philistine, okay, it doesn't mean that he was born in Philistia. It means that he's just an uncouth and an uncouth fellow. Or if somebody is a sodomite, it doesn't mean they came from Sodom, but they have the tendencies of that. So in Sodom represented immorality, Egypt represented slavery, and Babylon represented exile. And so Jerusalem is called by all of those three titles in Scripture. If you go to Ezekiel chapter 16:23, you walk away from that 50 times. Jerusalem is the harlot. Jerusalem is whore, abomination. It's the mother of the daughters of abominations. So in those two chapters, Ezekiel 16:2, 15, 16, 17, verse 20, 22, 25, 26, 26, verse 28, 29, and it goes on. You can go through Ezekiel 23, verse 3, 4, 7, 8, 11, harlot and abomination. It goes on, Hosea 3, 1 and 3. But everywhere, who is the harlot? Chaga! There, this place here. It had become a harlot because it had voided the commandments and the condition that God would bless them. For unintentional sins, you can't sin intentionally and expect forgiveness. So typologically, the New Jerusalem dated from the 10th century BC. Ontologically, it's a big word, 5 syllables, but every big word is a small idea, really. Mathematically, long word, means sums. Ontologically means you got some real world basis in something. It's not just something in your head. If I said there's a real thing as a flying teapot, okay? You're saying flying teapot? Teapots don't really have any aerodynamic merits. You know, I've never seen a flying teapot. But because we don't believe in it, because there never was one, and there can't be one simply by the nature of its design. So ontologically, it means that something exists in real fact, it's a model for something else. So ontologically, the 10th century institution in Jerusalem was the actual existential or real fact type for the new temple. So it was the real world pattern for the new spiritual temple in heaven. It was a real world foundation in its architecture. You find that duplicated in Revelation. In its dimensions, they are duplicated. In its plan, its material, in its function, in its personnel, in its furniture, in its purpose. All of those things are in the first temple, and that's why we can understand the second temple so well, or the temple, the New Jerusalem, because this is our knowledge base for that. So it's the temple is the ontological base for the New Jerusalem. Chronologically, it has to do with time. It unites all time facts, this idea of 1,000-year fulfillment in that generation. So chronologically, it fulfills all this generation there, near, soon, at hand, quickly to that generation. 40 years, that generation. 70 years, it ends in 70 AD. 1,000 years from construction to destruction. The first temple was destroyed in 586 on the 9th day of the month of Ab. It's a summer month. In 70 AD, it was destroyed on, yes, same day, same month, same season, summer. First, 1,260 days is 3.5 years. 42 months is the same period fulfilled in that generation. What else? 3.5 days, the dead bodies shall lie in the city in that generation, in Revelation 11. 3 times and half a time, from 66 to 70 was when Nero released next emperor Vespasian and Titus to go against it and reduce the Jews to subservience, but they didn't want to be served the Roman Empire. In a single hour, it says in Revelation 14, 7, 15, 15, 18, 10, 17, 19, in a single hour, her doom has come. So I think that single hour is the same as that 3.5 years spoken of as an event, not simply 60 minutes. 70 generations in the Dead Sea Scrolls, in the book of 1st Enoch, it says 70 generations to the judgment and the consummation of the ages. Okay? And that is the same time that Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 10:11 that Don mentioned earlier, that the consummation of the age, he says, is now. And this word, Greek word now, really, really old word, goes back before Homer, before 600 BC. It meant nun, met immediately. Then it came into classical Greek, then Koine Greek. Come into English is our English word now. It's the Greek word nun. Now at the consummation of the age, 1 Corinthians 10:11, but now once at the consummation of the ages in Hebrews 9:26. Same idea, same thing, at the end of 70 generations. If you go back to Luke, you'll find that Enoch was 70 generations, or 7 generations from Adam. So it's 70 generations to the Christ and to fulfillment. The same word nun is used in Jerusalem, of Jerusalem in Galatians 4. But now, like right now, not historical past, not potential future, but immediately, right now, Jerusalem is in slavery with her children, like she's like a pregnant woman about to give birth, but she couldn't. She couldn't give birth. She was impotent to give birth. Hagar was sterile. She couldn't have children. So, but only Jesus, in Jesus, the first fruits. So the heavens and earth that now exist, right now, referred to that age. So in a pattern of time facts, they all finish at exactly the same time. And you can understand the relationship of them all together. So we're talking about time, language, and context. In time, all of the time facts, and only all of the time facts, are uniformly first century. So the first destruction on that day, a short time, was equal to those period when the Roman armies were released. So chronologically, the 10th century temple unites all patterns of time facts. 8, and I've got 2 more to go after this. Semantically, millennium explains stuff, logically. It explains stuff, okay? So semantics has to do with the logical necessity or the necessary relations between terms. So in Revelation 20, it says Satan was bound by 1,000 years. In Jesus' life, Satan was bound. In the first resurrection, it says that Christ, that occurred in the year 30. So Christ was resurrected in 30, 40 years before the destruction of all things. Revelation 20, the 1,000 years, from construction to destruction, this institution, that was its life. And the judgment of Hades, this is a little bit more obscure, I guess, but the more you study it, the more you realize all the spiritual forces that empowered the world of the dead, Hades, was centered right here, right here. A few sources that connect Jerusalem and Hades. Hades has opened her mouth and Jerusalem shall descend into it. In Isaiah 28, Jerusalem has made a covenant with death and with Hades. By their willfulness, they rejected God, and it connects death and Hades. In Hades, Abraham said, they have the law and the prophets. The law and the prophets prophesied for 1,000 years. The law was in here. 1,000 years as a day. Do not be deceived. God has waited 1,000 years for this. That's okay. The day of the Lord, that day is still coming. The gates of Hades shall not prevail against it, Jesus said. The next one, the Jerusalem temple, contained the temple, the law, the covenant, all the blood that went right back to the foundation of the world, back to Abel, was in that temple. Death and Hades, when you are trampled in Isaiah 28. Jerusalem, trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until their time was fulfilled. I have the keys of death and Hades. The key to a Mustang, Don, what does it open? Let me guess, Mercedes, right? So a key to a Volkswagen opens a Volkswagen. A key to Hades opens, gotta be, right? Gotta be. So Jesus returns the second time in clouds to judge the city that rejected him, the holy city. And now he has the keys of death. When he judges this place here, he judges all those who died under his terms, going back to Abel. Why? Because all the blood was in the temple, and also all the blood was to be poured out upon that generation. That generation. So they're connected from the foundation of the world to the end, or foundation of the age, to the end of the age, in Jerusalem, in the temple, at the end of the 1,000 years. So I saw a pale horse and had the name Death and Hades. Death and Hades delivered up their dead and they were judged. Why? Because the temple was destroyed. Now, the saints under the altar say, how long, O Lord, before you avenge our blood? All the blood was in Jerusalem. So at the end of Jerusalem, vengeance was poured out. Is that true? In Luke 21, what is it, 32, I think? It says these right here. These are the days of vengeance when all things shall be fulfilled. So semantically, it explains stuff, this. Sequential model, reason 9. The sequential relations. If you turn to Revelation 19, you'll find out 18 and 19, all the blood, the harlot spilled all the blood, killed all the martyrs, everybody else. And now the great harlot is destroyed. That's the easy part. 21, the new Jerusalem comes down. That's the easy part. Old Jerusalem dies. New Jerusalem. What's in the middle? Chapter 20. Chapter 20. That confusing passage, it talks about the first resurrection, 40 years after Jesus' prophecy that the temple would be destroyed. What else? All the blood was to come upon that generation. Why? Because all the blood was in the temple. And all the blood was in Jerusalem. Because Jerusalem killed all the prophets. Like all of them. There's not one that was killed outside of Jerusalem. So Jerusalem, the middle bit, was the gates of Hades judged at the end of 1,000 years because all the blood was in Jerusalem. And so when Jesus returned to fulfill his promise and fulfill his testimony, really, of destruction of the temple, that's when all the dead were judged according to the terms of the covenant. So all this came about when Jesus fulfilled his temple prophecy to return in clouds in that generation. So sequentially, Revelation 20, 19 is cause-effect related to 21. The New Jerusalem can't come down before the old city is destroyed. And so that has to happen. When that happens, then Hades is judged. Then, that having been done, time is ended. And then eternity begins after that. So sequentially, it's at the end of 1,000 years. Teleologically, we dealt with this question earlier on, or the word actually, telos, which means end or goal or purpose. So teleologically, this same model explains all of fulfillment because the final aim of prophecy was a higher mental and moral order at the temple's end. This higher mental and moral order was really the restoration of God's mind back in the beginning of creation when he created the world, created order and justice and fairness and equity and all those elements that are really invisible to the human eye. But God created all those, and that's what sustains us even today, this higher mental and moral order. And Jesus came to realize that. Secondly, the teleological aim, the fulfillment, was by fulfilling 3,000 years of prophecy in a single hour. A single hour. Okay? A single state of affairs in the first century. And that would be evidence of number 3. a one-time for all time demonstration of Jesus' divinity, that there is a real God, that who's personal God, that cares for us, that loves us, that sent his son to die for us. And this is the rationality that he built into that Jesus said, this is my testimony. And you can believe it. You may believe it, because now it has what they call an epistemological foundation, that you can know this because it's based in history, you can check it, you can verify it, it has a basis in rational thinking. And if we don't have a rational basis for our religion, you don't have a rational religion. You have a nonsensical religion, or just something, I don't know, a fictitious religion. But if you don't have this kind of demonstration, then you don't have a rational basis for your religion. As preterists, this is what we do. Is this logical? Does it sound logical? It is logical. It's not my logic. I don't know anything. This is God's logic that he built into it, that is in it if we draw it out. The more reason you can bring to religion, to the Christian religion, the more rational it becomes. The more reason we bring to the Bible, reason works between facts. It doesn't change facts. It just explains the connections. That's all we've done. But this book here is the most, what William Foxwell Albright, the great scholar, what he said. He said, the Old Testament is the greatest monument to empirical logic known, and in some ways is more precise than formal logic. The greatest monument to empirical logic, which means, you can see it, taste it, touch it, smell it, all those tangible aspects of knowledge that we can know. So God has built those into this book. So teleologically, this sweet little building here was doomed before it began. At the time it was begun. It is the last hour, John says in 1 John chapter 2. The four angels prepared all this for the hour, the day, the month, and the year. What hour? It was in a single hour. What day? The 9th day. What month? The month of Ab. What year? The 2nd year of Vespasian. Was when the temple was destroyed, and that civilization disappeared entirely without any hope of ever being able to reassert itself. Why? Because the temple is gone. Now there's another building on top of the temple. And so you've got to get rid of that building and that people who built that building before you can build another temple, before you can claim ownership to the land. Now it's all gone and disappeared forever, just like what was said of Jericho. The hour of his judgment is near. That's a single hour. The hour to reap has come. In 1 hour, Babylon's judgment, Jerusalem, has come. In 1 hour, such great wealth has been laid waste. In terms of time, that's the main point. The temple's doom came in a single hour. It was the day of the Lord is a day of doom. In Ezekiel 33, for the day is near. It was local, okay? In that sense, there was a local event, but it prefigured this other event, which was to be definitive for God to achieve his purposes for all humanity. The day of the Lord is near, a cloudy day. It shall be a day of doom. A day of doom. And that picture is not us floating away with Jesus in the clouds. That's Jesus coming in clouds in destruction. The day and hour are revealed after the event. As Isaac Newton said, revelation wasn't given so that we can be prophets, but that after the event we can know this was a divine fulfillment. And if we can't know that, we can't know anything. So it was revealed after the event. God for certain doomed it to fire, says Josephus in his work called Wars of the Jews. I encourage you to read this book patiently, because it fills in a lot of the blanks, and it fills in, if the Bible is first century prophecy, this is first century history to explain the fulfillment of prophecy. So that fatal day had come the same day and month it was destroyed by the king of Babylon in 586. No coincidences here. So what we've seen is a pattern of facts with 10 constituent areas united by a first century model. And these are all the areas. So these are principles that we explain it. Historical principle, mathematical principle, contextual principle, prophetic principle, typological principle, ontological principle, chronological principle, semantic principle, sequential principle, teleological principle, all with the same pattern in facts. Each one is a mirror of that final event. Could this pattern be accidental? Okay. There was a fellow named Wittgenstein who has this humongous name, German, super smart German guy. But he wrote a thing called Tractatus. And in the Tractatus, I've adapted it a little. But he said, what is something is the existence of something. What is the biblical case, a biblical fact? What is a biblical fact? The existence of a biblical state of affairs or actual events that interweave the who, the what, the where, the why, the when, the how, all of those things interwoven into a single unit. 201. A biblical state of affairs, a state of things, is a combination of things, like the 10 things. They all combine together. How? Logically. What's the unifying factor? This building here. Third one, it says, it is essential to biblical things that they should be possible constituents or parts of a biblical state of affairs. So all these things, Roger. So in logic, he says, nothing's accidental. Okay, if a thing can occur in a biblical state of affairs, the possibility of that state of affairs must be written into the thing itself. So in logic is not accidental, it is logical within itself. So by adding 1,000 years, it ignores all the constituent parts, the history, the maths, the context, the prophecies, and everything else. So the conclusion is this. In short, it explains all the relevant time parts of prophecy and problem solves the failures of millenarianism. To many, this model may be little known and unfamiliar. But the surprising thing to me is its potential to problem solve. And its cohesion, the way it kind of glues together by itself. This working model is offered here as a kind of thread for people to tug on. So that's an idea. You don't have to accept it, but just tug on it and see what comes out. It's like fishing, really. We've got a fish on the line or not, But what it does two things. It places Jesus' prophecy back in its natural context in the first century. The disappearance at the end of Mosaic civilization, and two, it brings all the time facts under direct observation. Okay? Those two merits. It puts it back where it belongs, and now you can see how everything fits together. And do you know what? Do you know what? They are the same two merits as Copernican astronomy. When Copernicus put the sun back in its proper place, now you can see how all the planets move. But that was the first step. So this is just the first step. The habit of adding thousands of years has produced 2 millennia of failure, stunted our human imagination, closed our mind to logic. And now we begin a third millennium with the same probable outcome. It's most simply, there's two choices. Either the Jesus time facts are wrong, and I don't think we accept that, or the addition method is wrong, and we need to look back 1,000 years to the origin of these things. Praise be to God for all this. Thank you for your wonderful patience. And I'll turn it back to Al. Thank you.
There we go. Thank you very much, my brother. Okay, we will disband for the day. Going to stop the